Greetings, my kin and my people. I'm from the Black Charcoal Streak division of the Red Running Into Water clan of the Diné Nation. We are also incorrectly known as Navajo. In that manner, I present myself as a Diné woman. In our creation stories, we talk about how we have moved through many worlds before, and several of these worlds were destroyed, and we had to evolve to move into the next world. We have been knowing and prophesizing that a new world would come again, and this is something you find throughout many native cultures, and I don't think they are myths. I think they are actually true accounts of complete disruptions of the world we know. For instance, one of our worlds was destroyed by a flood, and you find this story all throughout the whole world. And so in our culture, we try very hard to not leave marks on the ground, because we know if you've done that, you've done something disrespectful. So we had vast civilizations throughout this area, but because there's no marks on the ground, archaeologists think we weren't here. But we were here. We were here in great numbers, and we had incredibly vast civilizations, and we learned through trial and error how to preserve your homeland. And one of the main principles is to not break what the Creator has made. For instance, a dam in a river is a form of breaking what Creator has made. People put dams in the river and they don't understand that salmon have to swim up that river, and those nutrients are important. They don't understand that nutrients and sediments and things flow down from the mountains into the sea, and that process is also very important. And so a lot of humanity today, which is so-called civilized and advanced, is very primitive, because they continue to break what the Creator has made. And when you break what the Creator has made, you are breaking the systems that Creator put in place for all beings to have life. So why would you break a system that was designed to support your life? And so here we are living in a life support system that has been tattered and worn and compromised by our progress, and we're so surprised that life on Earth is being destroyed. If you break the very systems that were put in place to support and enhance life, then there will be consequences. It's not a punishment, it's more just a natural fact that we have to maintain the processes that support life. And so we're in another time of change. We're in another time where a world is being destroyed and a new world is being created. And this, for us, is nothing new. We've been through this many times. One time, Creator sent our people a drought in Chaco Canyon, and that gave us the courage to change our ways, because in Chaco Canyon, we had hierarchy, we had caste systems, we were exhausting the ability and the generosity of the earth, and we were not living in a good way. And so we were given a great drought, and that caused us to change. But nothing else would have given us the courage to change, sadly. And so we're in a similar position now, where we don't know how to get the courage to alter the way we eat, sleep, and drink, the way we clothe ourselves, the way we relate to one another. We are a culture of hierarchy. From the beginning of the inception of the United States, we are a culture of hierarchy. This is not of Creator. Instituting systems of hierarchy is one way that we break what Creator has made, because Creator made equality, and Creator made systems that only work when there is equality. And so, of course, naturally, there will be consequences. Again, not as a punishment, but just you can't break the very thing that was put in place to sustain all life. And so many civilizations across this country rose and fell. We know about collapse here before Columbus was ever born. We know how whole civilizations can rise and fall. It happened to the Maya. It happened to the Chaco Canyon dwellers. It happened to a lot of us. And so we understand what unsustainability means in the marrow of our bones and in our DNA. We learned the hard way through trial and error how you live and how you don't live. And so all of the beautiful words in our language, ajoba, hojon, all of these words that mean humility, beauty, and kinship, we earned those words. We had to fight tooth and nail for those words. We had caste systems and slavery in our societies, and we learned that that doesn't work. We learned that that destroys not just people, but it destroys the planet. And so through those shedding of systems, shedding of things that don't work, we became a sustainable culture. It wasn't a given, we weren't just born this awesome, we had to work for it. And so a lot of native cultures are revered as being sustainable and advanced in their spiritual and ecological behavior. But I think it's important for people to know that we went through what this society is going through right now in order to get there. And so right now, America as we know it is undergoing an amazing learning process, and it hurts. It hurts to go up against the dead-end wall and run out of bullets and realize you don't really know how to feed yourself, to realize you don't really know how to live on the earth in a sustainable way. It does hurt, and it's going to hurt. But the good thing about all of this is that by the end of it, we're going to know lessons in the marrow of our bones of how to walk on this earth and how not to walk on this earth. We are in a process of great learning, and it's a painful lesson, but this is something that our people went through time and time again. The greatest trick to ever befall humanity is this idea that we are pests, this idea that we are misfits of creation, because that narrative creates itself. If we are born into original sin and we're a problem, we oftentimes act out that label. But the truth is that we are integral and essential and critical to the smooth functioning of ecosystems. The Yoruba word for human being is chosen one. And it's called chosen one because we were chosen to steward the earth. In other words, the earth needs us. In my language, the word for human is Diné, which means holy earth surface being. And when we call ourselves holy, we honor the fact that we belong here. And not only do we belong here, but we are celebrated here. And so there are many, many examples of ways that human beings have acted as keystone species within their biome. What is a keystone species? A keystone species is a species that if you were to take it out, the whole web of ecology would crumble. They're like a linchpin. One example of humanity acting as a keystone species is the Heiltsuk Nation off the British Columbia coast in Bella Bella. They hand plant kelp all along the shoreline, and that kelp increases the surface area that the herring can lay their eggs. The herring fish can lay their roe. And that roe is the foundation of the food web. The killer whales end up eating it, the salmon end up eating it, the wolves end up eating it, and everything up the food chain. And so single-handedly, literally with their hands, these beautiful human hands, they are creating and sustaining entire food webs. And they plant miles and miles of kelp. And this is what their ancestors learned how to do. Now, you also have the California natives who used prescribed burns long before Columbus was even born. They burned around the oak groves deliberately in a low-intensity manner, such that it was safe and they did it in the right time of year. And their rule of thumb, according to one elder, is only 14 trees per acre. We must only have 14 trees per acre. Now you have 200 to 400 trees per acre. And so you have many, many trees fighting for limited nutrients, water, and sunlight. And so instead of having 14 very robust, healthy trees that produce nuts for the people and the birds and the squirrels, you have 400 weak trees that have low immune systems and are dry, especially in the era of climate change. And so by eliminating the indigenous peoples of California in that Holocaust that occurred there, you are removing a keystone species. And what do we have? We have a tinderbox. We have lots of trees close together competing for limited water. They're all dried up. And that is also to blame for the California wildfires. Same is true for Australia. The Aboriginal peoples of Australia burned, and they still burn, in a low intensity, safe, dependable manner at the right time of year. And that creates patches of burned areas that regrow at different stages. And each patch is at a different stage of regrowth. And so you have one patch that was burned a year ago, another patch that was burned 2 years ago, another patch that was burned 3 years ago. And each of those patches is in a different stage of successional growth. So you increase the biodiversity, because a patch that was burned 1 year ago has a different set of flora and fauna than a patch that was burned 3 years ago. And so when you illegalize burning, cultural burning by Aboriginal Australians, which is what they did, you essentially remove a keystone species from doing the job that they are meant to do. And the ecosystem collapses. They found a lot of endemic species go extinct when they illegalized the cultural burning of Aboriginal peoples. Same with California. The cultural burning that completely managed that entire state was illegalized, prohibited, and destroyed. And now we have wildfires all across California because that gentle pressure of fire at the right time of year in a low intensity manner was erased. And so humanity is meant to be a keystone species. We are meant to be a gift to the earth. And it is not our fault that we don't know how to do that anymore. That has been very deliberately destroyed. That knowledge of how to be a keystone species, how to be a nourisher, how to be so good to the earth that if you were to leave, she would miss you. That knowledge has been deliberately destroyed from humanity in the form of boarding schools where they destroyed Native American ecological knowledge, in the form of prohibiting the Welsh language from being spoken in schools throughout the 1900s and 1800s. If you were caught speaking Welsh, they'd put a block of wood around your neck that said WN, and that stood for Welsh not. And you could only get this block of wood off of your neck if you caught another kid speaking Welsh. And so this is how they humiliated the Welsh language, which is an indigenous ecological language that was born in that land and co-evolved in that land and contains secrets of how to take care of that land. That is how that language was nearly obliterated. And so it's very important to understand that it's not our fault that we don't know how to take care of the earth. It's not our fault that negative spirits have been working a long time to destroy what Creator has made. It's not our fault that we don't know how to be good to our mother. That was taken away from us generations ago. The good news is we can get it back. We can pray our way back. We can fight to protect what few native languages still exist on this continent. We can fight to generate Native American knowledge schools that perpetuate this kind of knowledge. We can bring these Native children out of the public school system, which does not honor who they are or what their elders stand for, and create schools that nourish and perpetuate the knowledge systems of their communities. And that's what I'm fighting to do each and every day. So I'm half Native American and half European, and I carry a lot of trauma from both sides. In Europe, women were burned alive for knowing the land, for knowing the songs, for knowing the herbs, for knowing the rocks, for knowing the mountains. And we also have the prohibition of indigenous European languages. We also have the British Army killing the storytellers of the Scottish communities and burying them face down so that their stories would die with them. We have lots of examples of the destruction of indigenous European culture. We also have figurines that were found in German soil in 2009 that were of a woman. And these clay figurines were depicting the sanctity of the feminine and the sanctity of the earth. And when you radiocarbon date these figurines, they're 40,000 years old. And so this is how long our people on the European side, I'm talking, have been honoring the earth and have been understanding their role as children of women and of the earth. And so we are carrying a lot of trauma as Europeans, and we in turn inflict that trauma on others. We are perpetuating cycles of destruction that were committed upon our ancestors. And I might even dare to say it was worse than here in America, because at least here you didn't publicly disembowel people and tear their guts out while they were still alive on the public square, you know. At least here, I mean, we did have torture chambers here, but not quite to the scale in Europe. We didn't burn people alive as much as we did in Europe. And so that trauma is still there when we have a hard time accessing it and mourning it and releasing it and forgiving it. And so for me to recover my culture, I had to do two jobs. Number one, I have to learn my indigenous language as a Diné woman here in the deserts of the southwestern United States. I have to understand what my people went through in the concentration camps outside of Albuquerque, where thousands of them died. But I also, on the other hand, I have to understand what happened to my father's people, where his people were also marched on death marches. His people were also raped and pillaged. His grandmothers were destroyed. Imagine watching your mother get burned alive. Imagine watching your sister get burned alive as a man. Watching your daughter get burned alive. That destroys the spirit of the men just as deeply as it destroys the women folk. And so the way to recover this culture for me is to go back to the land. And so I've been very fortunate to go back to Europe and to go to these places where these things happened and to pray and to feel the land hold me and to feel the land care for me. And I think that we as European folks, if we have the opportunity, need to go back to our land and feel it and understand it and understand where we come from and understand that we come from beautiful people and understand that we come from beautiful songs and beautiful ceremonies. And so the dances that Native people still have are simply recitations of our Constitution. Our dances are not art. They are devices to teach and educate the next generation about the principles and the skills that will support their life future forward. And so also our art, our jewelry, our baskets, our clothing, all of that to the untrained eye just looks like a piece of art. But if you look deeper, they're devices. They're tools that guide us and teach us. And if you know how to read them, you can learn a lot. And so we did have forms of literacy. They weren't the written word, but we had incredibly advanced and complex forms of literacy that we would use to teach our children. Everything from songs that took 10 days to sing to squash blossom necklaces that depict Changing Woman and her warrior twins and how the balance between men and women must be for us to survive, and on and on and on. And so I think that if you are a European and you don't have your culture anymore because it was brutally ripped away from you 1,000, 2,000 years ago, then one thing you can do is fight to support Native cultures that still exist and fight to bring them up and fight to protect them from assimilation and be vocal about it and be proactive about it, because they are mirror reflections of that European indigenous culture. That indigenous culture, I have found it in Thailand, I found it in New Zealand, I found it in Australia, I found it in South Africa. It's the same principles manifested in different ways in different cultures, but they're the same core values: kinship, compassion, generosity, truth, faith, and love. That's all it is. And so if you understand that by helping Native American cultures, you're really helping your own culture. You're really teaching yourself about who you really are, then I think all of us would benefit, because Native peoples are deeply in need, and they need the world to stand behind them, and they need the world to protect this little shreds of truth that we have left, like a little ember of a fire glowing. We need to protect that from the winds that want to put it out, and we need to blow on it and feed it fuel and wood so that it can rise up again.